On September 11, 2001, 19 militants associated with the Islamic extremist group Al-Qaeda hijacked 4 airlines and carried out suicide attacks against targets in the United States. 2 planes were flown into the towers of the World Trade Center in New York. A 3rd plane hit the Pentagon just outside of Washington, D.C., and the 4th crashed into a field in Pennsylvania. The attackers were Islamic terrorists from Saudi Arabia and several other Arab nations. Supposedly supported by Osama bin Laden's Al-Qaeda terrorist organization, they were allegedly acting in retaliation for America's support of Israel, its involvement in the Persian Gulf War, and its continued military presence in the Middle East. Operation Enduring Freedom, the American-led international effort to oust the Taliban regime in Afghanistan and destroy Osama bin Laden's terrorist network based there, began on October 7th. Osama bin Laden, the mastermind behind the September 11th attacks, remained at large until May 2, 2011, when he was finally tracked down and killed by U.S. forces at a hideout in Pakistan. In June 2011, President Barack Obama announced the beginning of large-scale troop withdrawals from Afghanistan, with the final withdrawal of U.S. forces tentatively scheduled for 2014.
During the first 10 years of the 21st century, the U.S. faced a severe economic recession and a significant downturn in the U.S. stock market. Unemployment passed the 10% mark for the first time since 1983. With zero net job growth and the slowest rise in economic output, many who stayed employed were hurt too. Middle-income families were making less in 2008 than they did in 1999. On average, American families were worse off. The United States housing bubble affected many parts of the United States housing market. Housing prices peaked in early 2006 and started to decline around 2007 and reached new lows in 2012. In late 2009, more than 14% of homeowners with a mortgage were either behind on their payments or facing foreclosure. The amount of debt consumers carry shot up 67%, peaking in June 2008 at $2.57 trillion. Even though the recovery from the recession is 5 years old, we are still heavily impacted.
Bush's tax cuts was something that he was persistent about. After his 77th day in office, Bush was able to get Congress on board with his $1.3 to $1.4 trillion tax cut for the top 5%. With the tax cuts only benefiting the wealthy, there was now a 10% bracket for the working poor, while the top 3 brackets were lowered. Former President George W. Bush's No Child Left Behind was his signature yet most controversial legislation. This education policy mandated certain benchmarks for each state to achieve, like more tutoring and smaller classrooms. Although the idea and concept was ideal, the federal government was not given the funds to carry the legislation act. This left many states nearly bankrupt to support it. George W. Bush's foreign policy consisted for him to declare and go to war with Iraq. Without a declaration of war or the approval of Congress, this was sensed to be one of the most irrational legislation.
Some of President Barack Obama's main policies since taking his position in 2008 included major reforms in education, healthcare, taxes, and immigration. For example, President Obama had the goal to make math and science education a national priority. He addressed the dropout crisis and supported college credit initiatives. On the subject of immigration, President Obama plans to create secure borders, protect the integrity of our borders, fix the dysfunctional immigration bureaucracy, and increase the number of legal immigrants to keep families together and meet the demand for jobs that employers cannot fill. Obamacare is the unofficial name for the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, which was signed into law on March 23, 2010 by President Barack Obama. Its main focus is on providing more Americans with access to affordable health insurance, improving the quality of health care, regulating the health insurance industry, and reducing health care spending in the U.S. And within weeks of taking office, President Obama took immediate action in the midst of the economic crisis to restore security for middle-class families by cutting their taxes in the Recovery Act.